I would love to see Tammy pop on. Here you go. We have Lib and we have Marcelo. And so as we get started, I'm going to do a quick intro, but I would love for you to put a little bit of your bio into the chat. And so first of all, we have Tammy here. Tammy, that was my childhood name. So I feel very fond towards that. My grandmother still calls me Tammy. Tammy here is the founder and the CEO of Workplaceless. They have tons of awesome L&D curriculum with very clever names. So you have Workplaceless, you have Lead Placeless, you have Go Placeless, Train Placeless, Grow Placeless. So you can do anything you want Placeless with Tammy. Next, we have Lib here, and she is coming in, I think, from Tulsa, which Allie loves. So Tulsa is like a hot spot for remote work. They have great policies there. I grew up in Texas, about 3 hours away from Oklahoma. So I used to go to Tulsa with my father on business trips, actually. Lib here is known as the Remote Work Queen. She runs this awesome conference. It's coming up in March called the Quit Commuting Conference. And as somebody that gets very car sick very easily, I love that goal. And she also has a personal mission to help 10,000 moms land remote work jobs, which I love. I do not have children myself, but most of my friends are young mothers. And so I really resonate with that mission. And we also have Marcelo here, who is coming in, I think, from Lisbon. Marcelo is a serial entrepreneur. He has co-founded, he's the COO of remote.com. And just to toot Marcelo's horn, it is a unicorn company. It is, at least from what I saw last year, it was valued at $3 billion. They raised $300 million in fundraising. And for those who are wondering what remote.com does, it handles all of the aspects that you think, oh, it'd be great to have an international workplace, but like, how do we do like the legal and the compliance and the paying people? Remote.com has that covered. And so we have awesome guests today in the chat. If you have questions, please have them come through. We would love to make this as interactive as possible. I have some specific questions to start off with, but Tam, Lib, and Marcelo, feel free to build on each other's comments. I just want this to be a fun conversation in this 45-minute panel. So to begin with, we're going to play a little game called Overrated or Underrated. And so I'm going to name a couple things. You can tell me what you think. And so just to make this interactive, I don't know, it's morning. I'm not a morning person. And so trying to get some energy here today. If you think it's overrated, make an O. And if you think it's underrated, make a U. Okay? So with that, the first thing about productivity, and we're going to talk a lot about getting things done today. And as you can hear from the bios of these three awesome people, they get a lot done. So we have a lot to learn from them. But first things first, the Pomodoro technique, which is a very popular productivity technique where you focus for 25 minutes and then you take a break. Overrated, underrated. Okay, we have 2 overrateds, 1 underrated. And if you have a hot take, feel free to unmic and let us know if you're like, actually, let me tell you why I think this is really overrated, underrated. Next one, and also feel free in the chat box, guests that are here, tell us what it is. And go Liv, tell us.
I'm going to say it because somebody asked me specifically. I know that like the people on this panel, we work with highly productive people typically, like in our day-to-day lives, and we're highly productive. So I can see why we would say it's overrated. But the people that I work with who are looking to work remotely, who have never done it, they've never used it and they aren't using anything. Right. And so my perspective is that a lot of people need something to get started to be more productive. And so I'm coming from a perspective of like, I work with a lot of people that have no idea how to be productive, you know?
I love that, like putting into context the span of what productivity might look like. And I have my own Pomodoro technique, so I'm just going to mention that here. I'm very into the show Homeland at the moment, kind of a flashback to Claire Danes about like 5 to 10 years ago. But I like to do 25 minutes of intense work, and then I treat myself with a little bit of Homeland, and then I go back to work. So that is my version of the Pomodoro technique. A couple weeks ago, it was like only murders in the building. That was my kind of treat. So that is one thing you can do with remote work. Next thing, zero inbox. And so for people that don't know what zero inbox is, it's trying to keep your inbox empty at all times. Overrated, underrated? Okay, we have 2 overrated. We have 1 underrated. Marcelo, you're gonna have to tell us why.
Well, I'm mostly addressing those people that can't organize themselves, even if their lives depend on it, and not for anyone else. And that is my concern. The people that I'm not one to use email a lot, but you email them and then you see 66,300 emails unread or in the inbox, and that gives me a bit of, oh my god. And then things get lost, and oh, I'm sorry, I lost your email. You can do better.
Okay, I like that. Yes, I had a very big difference between my work email and my personal email. And my personal email, when I go in there, first of all, I chose the longest email address possible, my entire name, Tamara Christine Sanderson, which takes a long time to type in when you're on your phone. But anyways, I had that problem of like so many emails. So I do like inbox zero, but I do remember doing that a lot at Google, which just meant I made a lot of work for other people by sending off emails as quick as possible. So I think there's pros and cons, but I like your hot take. Okay, next one, non-linear days. Overrated, underrated? Okay, nice. We have a agreement here. Tammy, since you haven't talked, let me know, why do you think you're pro non-linear days?
Well, just from a personal perspective, I really love like doing a workout in the middle of the day. I'm not a morning workout person, and so I like to do the things that I want to do at the time I want to do it, and asynchronous and remote work allow me to do that. And the more experience I get in this world, the more I try to take advantage of those nonlinear days. So every day I find a different way to take advantage of my flexibility.
Awesome. Yes, I think nonlinear days might be my favorite part of remote work. I am a night owl, which means that I am not a morning person, so it helps me wake up later. When I was a nomad and I traveled around Europe, it meant that I could go to museums or the beach during the day and do some work at night. Next, we have 2 more. So MIT, most important tasks, sometimes called eat the frog, overrated, underrated.
Is there a rated?
I feel like this. I feel like we don't even
Like
need
a diphthong? Can we do like a you
Yeah,
all?
I saw everybody's like eyebrows, and it was like maybe.
It depends on the
Okay.
day.
I agree. I think it depends on the day. I like that. That is so true,
And
Tammy.
what the thing is, because sometimes you just can't do it first. Like it can't be
True.
done first.
Yeah, totally. It can't always be done first. So I like that. So we have some eyebrows. I think that'll be our answer for this. And one more. Overrated or underrated, the remote work mullet, which means business on the top, sweatpants on the bottom. We have an underrated. Okay, so Tammy, why do you think it's underrated?
It's just comfortable. I don't know. I mean, I rock athleisure wear all day long. But then sometimes I want to put on like a nice top because what else am I going to do with those nice tops? So yeah, underrated.
Awesome, cool. And Marcelo, I saw you were doing a little underrated too. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, my thoughts are I'll always wear whatever I want. So some days I'll just wear a nice fancy jacket just because I felt like dressing up. And some days I'm just rocking a t-shirt and something whatever I managed to put on, and that's about it.
Great.
Yeah.
And Lib, I saw you go like this. You were agreeing with wear whatever you want. What are your last thoughts on that before we go on to more about productivity?
I'm in the do what you feel camp. Do what you
Mhm.
feel, like whatever works that day. Some days it's a t-shirt and some sweatpants. Some days I feel like getting cute. Some days I feel like getting halfway cute. Fake cute on the top.
I
Do what you
think
feel.
my big cute is I put some lipstick on. That's always like my big trick, even if I just woke up. So, okay, so we have some wear what you want and treat yourself. I love that frame of mind. And so, as we get back into productivity mode, So Allie and I are giant nerds and we love to define things. And so with productivity, especially business jargon, we love to define some business jargon because it gets thrown around and then it's like, what does that actually even mean? Why are we always circling back? Where are we circling to? Why are we like, I don't know. I'm going to like, let's sync later. What does sync mean? So with that, does anybody want to say their definition in one sentence of what is productivity?
Sure.
Okay,
So
Tammy, go for it.
productivity means getting work done in a certain amount of time.
Okay, awesome. Nice, simple. Lib, what's yours?
I like to think of it as making progress. And I like to say that specifically because the done part adds pressure to people, right? And so people think that unless they check it off and complete something, that they weren't productive. And there is productivity in progress as well. So I think it's moving forward towards completion.
Awesome. And Marcelo, what's your definition?
It's do things that move the needle.
Awesome. Okay, so it sounds like I see, Tammy, you added into a component of time. So I feel like your definition actually was an equation, how much you get done versus kind of the time that is taking. And Lib, Marcelo, I think you were both in kind of this moment of make progress. And that might be very small tasks that lead up to something bigger. It doesn't all have to be completed in one day. It reminds me, there's this like great writing book and there's this whole concept of just take it bird by bird. And it was kind of it was by this woman named Anne, and she wrote this great writing book, but it was her little brother that had like a project due the next day and he had to draw all these birds and he had not done anything. And his dad kept just saying, bird by bird, you just draw one bird at a time. And so with this, I think you're kind of saying, get one thing done, make some progress, make some headway, and you can see the vision in the future. So now we're going to go on to some individual questions. Lib, I want to talk to you a little bit about commute. So I hate commuting. I love that you have a whole conference that's about quit commuting. But sometimes when I tell people, like, isn't it great you don't have a commute? They're like, yeah, but I have no boundary now between work and home. And so I'd love to know, what are your tips for people that no longer have that commute to make some separation between work and their personal life?
Yeah, it's a good call out. I love to say that I really, really love that my home is in my office, but I really, really hate that my office is in my home because it's easy to take over, right? I can be sitting at my desk, and this happened to me last night. Look up, and it's 11 o'clock, and I'm still here at my desk. We miss those social cues, right? Where people are like, hey, let's go to lunch. We're all heading to such and such, or there's cake in the break room, or people are starting to shut down to leave for the day, right? And so without those social cues, it's very, very easy to get completely immersed in working. So the thing is, without a commute, you win back at 5 to 10 hours a week. That's a part-time job. Some people's part-time job is commuting, right? And they're not even getting paid for that, right? That's volunteer work. So you have a part-time volunteer job driving to and from work every week. And so I think that what we unfortunately do is once we get back into the house, get home and remove that commute, we don't take advantage of that other 10 hours. All that stuff that you said you could have been doing if you weren't commuting, it's time to be intentional about doing those things, right? I want to work out. I want to start meditating. I want to start reading. I want to start, going for walks, doing those things. And for some folks, you might have to put something on your calendar, right? Without a social cue, you need to create a cue. Right. So there might be, a special alarm that goes off at 6 p.m. or, whatever time you want your quitting time to be that indicates that it's time to shut your computer down and go out into your home and enjoy your home, the people that live there with you, the things that you've accumulated in that home. Right. And so I think that a lot of times it's really just about being intentional because you don't have the social cues. You have to create them yourself.
I love that. Yeah, I think the social cues we forget about, even if you go into an office, right? Like on LinkedIn, everybody wants to talk about how they miss the water cooler, which is interesting because I don't remember people talking about it a ton when I was in the office. But that being said, it was a social cue of like you go to the water cooler and you have a conversation. And you're basically saying at home, you still need those social cues of like, hey, time to put away the laptop, time to get on to the rest of my life. And so you need to be more intentional about creating those, whether it's alarm or something else. Yeah. Tammy, Marcelo, do either of you have any kind of cues that you use to signal it's time to stop work or start work?
Again, it depends on the day. But my husband and I work together and we both work from home. So I actually rely on him often to, give me clues to stop working. So whether it's like an evening ritual of like walking the dog or doing something else, we rely on each other to give each other those cues. In the morning, it really is a question of what my priorities are for the day and what task I want to accomplish first. Where and when I want to fit all of the other things I want to put into my day. So it really just depends. But I'm pretty flexible. Like I don't necessarily start work always at a certain time. Some days, like I go to my exercise classes in the morning. And so I don't really start diving into work until like 11 a.m. And then some days I start working at 7 because I'm inspired to write something. So it really just depends. And my cues are just what I have to do that day. And then, fitting that in and making sure I get all that done.
Awesome. And I like how you mentioned rituals. That I feel like this is a hack that I've heard a lot of people use, and I've done it before as well, that you don't have to have a commute in a car in traffic that's really hectic. You can have a little commute around your block with your partner, with your dogs, by yourself, with a podcast. And that can be a really nice way to create that separation without spending 5 to 10 hours in a car, like Liv said.
Can I add to, I love something that Tammy called out, that this can be flexible. Like there's not a one size fits all. There's not a specific thing that you have to do every single day. I love that she, pointed out that sometimes I work out in the morning, sometimes I work out at night. Same. I hate working out at night, but sometimes you just have to do it. Right. And so I think that we're going to share a whole lot of great tips throughout this conversation. But I think one of the underlying things is you've got to be able to do what works for you, and you've got to be able to be flexible. Things change on a day-to-day basis. Right. And so be okay with tweaking the system, tweaking the plan. And I think some of the things that you can do in the afternoon is schedule some appointments away from your desk, right? Like if you got to go meet somebody, for drinks, or you got to go meet your trainer, or you got to go to a dance class, that's going to get you away from the desk too. I wanted to add that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I like how actually, Lib, I think your advice for what to wear and how to work are very similar. You do you, whatever is working for you. And I love doing a lot of errands in the afternoon. I think that can be like, I like to get groceries then. I have been wearing a retainer for 2 days for my dentist, and I picked it up in the middle of the day. I think that can be a really nice way to have those breaks and be able to get some of that personal admin done. Okay, so a question, Marcelo. I want to talk to you a little bit about scaling a business. So you are this co-founder of remote.com, but you also have done other startups before. I'm curious, what have you noticed when people have struggled in a remote environment to scale? And if you have any other tips for people that are starting their own business that's remote?
Well, it depends. I always find the same questions and the same issues with the companies that either I coach or mentor or something in the space, which is, everyone struggles with culture, because one of the biggest issues is that people are trying to transplant the idea of office culture to a remote company. And culture is not a space. Culture is not, a ping pong table, happy hour on Fridays. That is not culture. Those are amenities. Those are things that come with a lease. They don't come with a job, right? It is, it's been a useful gimmick for a long while to try to turn, an environment in a more friendly place and get people to work longer as well. And this, dichotomy also means that there's a lot of founders or people running companies, or even just managers that are having their first remote experience. So that means that they're trying to transpose something they saw work in the past, and they're trying to fit, a square in a triangle, and that will break, because all of a sudden you're going to force people into stand-ups. I don't know. I have one of our teams of many teams. We're 1,000 people. One person is in Portugal, the other person is in Kyrgyzstan, and the other person is in India, and then there's another person in Australia. So if you force a stand up on these people, they're going to be miserable, right? In that, if you ask those people what culture is, for them, they would describe the culture as, being rigid, unfriendly. And so my biggest takeaway on this is that, building companies you have to create the culture from the ground up and be open to the fact that as companies grow, culture needs to mutate, and sometimes you have to change it aggressively too, so that it adheres to the different people that you're onboarding, different cultures, backgrounds and needs, beliefs, you name it. And to me, that is maybe the biggest takeaway, because some people try to scale something that worked for like small companies, and then all of a sudden they don't work anymore. On top of that, you're onboarding people that were used to work in an office, trying to bring in outdated experiences. So that's about it.
Nice. I love that you're bringing up, Ali also likes this point as well, that she mentions it to me a lot, but a pool table or kombucha on tap, those are all amenities. They're not actually your culture. And I also like that you're talking about that you need to find something that fits for your organization. So as somebody that I worked at Google for 7 years, and obviously that was a place with a lot of ping pong tables, right? And that was a part of the culture. But that was actually like copy and pasted from Stanford. They wanted Google to feel just like where they did their PhDs. And so I think there's something interesting is that wasn't the model of how every company needs to have a tech place. And so now you have the freedom to create your own. And I love how you're mentioning you have these people in all these different countries, that it actually wouldn't be fun if you made the culture that everybody has to have a stand up at the same time. And so you can have that liberation to change and adapt as your company scales. So I think that's great. Tammy, so you have a blog that talks about a lot of your tips that are in your L&D classes. You mentioned the importance of implementing autonomous work. And so I'm very big on autonomy. I think it's really important. But sometimes when you hear the word autonomous, it's like, are we robots now? What exactly does that mean? Is AI taking over? What happened to ChatGPT? I'm curious, what is autonomous work and how does that play into productivity in a remote environment?
Yeah, so autonomous work is when employees are able to choose when, where, and how they accomplish their assigned tasks and roles. So in terms of productivity in the context of remote work, productivity means being able to, or having that necessary environment and access to information so you can accomplish your work autonomously without the external cues or motivation that come from an office. And so when employees when they have higher levels of autonomy, they're more satisfied, they're more likely to stay at an organization. And that collective autonomy also means that the teams and business itself are able to get done more quickly, even in the face of crises, or doesn't even have to be crises, but change. And so it's really critical to maintaining productivity and improving productivity to enable autonomous work within teams and then also individually.
Awesome. Thanks, Tammy. And I think with autonomous work, when people are like, oh, I think one of the things that I noticed at the pandemic was when I was at Automatic, an all remote company from the ground up, we were barely on Zoom, and I was on it some because I did corporate development and partnerships, but for the most part within the organization, maybe you would be on Zoom once a week. And then in the pandemic, everybody was like, oh, I'm on Zoom for 8 to 9 hours every single day. I look at myself more than I've ever seen myself in my entire life. And I was like, that's not how really good remote work looks for the most part. And I think what you're talking about, autonomy, is the thing that unlocks being able to have that nonlinear day and that freedom to work if you want to.
Yeah.
So I think it's so critically important. So I want to talk a little bit about, this is one of my very favorite stats. And so I don't know, do you all use Asana? Ali and I are big Asana users. That's our knowledge base. And they have this great anatomy of work report. And in it, they said that actually 60% of people's time is spent on things called work about work. And that is things such as like communicating kind of about work, searching for information, switching between tabs, herding cats, shifting priorities, all those things that are not actually your core job responsibility. And so actually a minority of people's time, 40%, is spent on the things that they were hired for, either strategic or skilled work. So I have a question. What are some of your best practices for getting rid of that, or like reducing the time that you're spending on those administrative work about work tasks? And this is open to anybody. So if anybody wants to chime in, and you can build on each other's comments.
Use more async. That would be my suggestion. So, especially tasks that are related to like planning to plan, like that kind of like, endless circle and spiral. Async can really alleviate the need to spend so much sync time to develop, adequate plans and, concrete steps forward. And what I love about async is that it gives you so much time to really think thoroughly about a work process. Whereas when work processes are decided primarily in synchronous conversations, you take away that time to really think deeply about how a process actually needs to be done. So that would be my suggestion there, is incorporate more async into anything that is work about work or meetings about meetings. And one quick way to gauge whether a meeting is right is just ask yourself the question, is a meeting the best way to accomplish this task? Is it or is it just the easiest way to accomplish this task because this is how we're used to deciding about planning, and we've never really tried anything else? So is a meeting the best way to achieve this outcome?
I love the word easy versus best, because I do think it is really easy to just be like, let's just get on Zoom. I don't have to think about it until I have something pop up in my calendar, but that does not actually mean it's the best.
Yeah.
Tammy, would you mind, just in case people are not familiar with the word async, what is that?
Yeah, so async communication is communication that does not happen simultaneously. So there's an expected delay or a built-in delay. So in an ideal world, email is actually asynchronous. So I send the message and then there's a delay and somebody responds on their time. And when async communication is the default or the prioritized method of communication, you see a better balance between that async and sync, and you have those built-in delays to adequately think through responses, and also to move a process along according to a defined process, as opposed to just trying to recreate a process every single time it comes up.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. That's a great definition. Lib, do you have anything to add? I see you just unmuted.
Listen, preach, Tammy. Preach, girl. Someone literally tried to schedule a meeting with me yesterday to go over an agenda, and I was like, if you don't email this to me, and back away. And I think honestly, a lot of the mindset of the way we work, we don't realize this, but it's very selfish. It's not empathetic. And it's not considerate, because in the moment that we're scheduling these meetings and insisting on doing these things, we're thinking about what we need right now. We're not thinking about what this other person may be doing, need to do. Maybe people need time to actually put their hands on keyboards and get work done, right? Maybe people need time to go pick their kids up from school. And so for me, I think a lot of this is about being efficient, about being productive, but also about being considerate and empathetic to the people that you work with. And so I think async is also my call out, my tip. So, things where you've got to walk somebody through, you set something up, you've got to walk somebody through it. It doesn't hurt, just record a quick video and send that to them and say, if you have more questions after watching this, we can schedule a meeting. Give them the option, right? Give people options. I think that's something else that was called out by Tammy as well. When we talked about autonomous working, people love choices. People love options. Let's give them to them, right?
I love that. I love specifically calling out that it could be selfish. I don't think that is something that comes to, maybe that's a selfish opinion. Like it, yeah, it doesn't come, that wouldn't be like the first thing that comes to my mind, but I love framing it that way. I have ADHD, and so there is a thing with transitioning, which can be really hard, especially because usually I can get hyper focused, which Allie knows because I'll send her a lot of stuff at one time, and she's like, "Whoa, my Asana inbox is blowing up. You have written a lot of stuff." But that transition time can be hard. So having like little mini meetings across the day, and I remember that was very common at the beginning of my career. I just could not focus. It would be like 30 minutes, and then I could just, as I was starting to get into some other work, somebody would pop on my back and, hey, let's talk about this, or time to go to another meeting. And it was just really overwhelming, and it was really inefficient way to get things done. So I love the idea of it being considerate, and also there being a lot of options. I have another question for you all, and maybe Marcelo, if you want to, take a crack at this first. Allie and I often give a talk on O'Reilly about productivity, and everybody likes to tell us about their favorite productivity tools and hacks and all of that kind of stuff, which is very much kind of like tech culture. Marcelo, do you have any kind of favorite hacks or tips on how to be more productive at work?
Well, it's mostly about the outcomes. I think it also answers the previous question, which is, you should be measuring the outcomes, not just of the team or the company, but yourself. And prioritize, given the flexibility that remote work provides, also prioritize yourself. And if you learn to be a bit more selfish with, time doesn't go back, you can't buy time again. And so if you start valuing your time and others, you will realize that, other than scrolling through TikTok, which, by the way, I'm a huge fan, and I have an issue, but you have to value that. Like, maybe it's serving a purpose in that moment, or maybe you're just procrastinating, and might as well, rather than scrolling through Slack and the channels and go back and forth, maybe the best thing is to just walk away and go do something else. As far as productivity goes, or hacks, I'm an engineer by trade, so I tend to automate all the things. I have a Stream Deck in front of me where each button is tied to something, open my next meeting and join the link. I don't know, send an email to do that. Anything that is repetitive, I'll create an automation for it, and so it'll save me a bunch of stuff. Even controlling the lights in the office and things like that. Now I try to, just use my time as much as possible for the things that I really have to use my time. Anything else, I try to automate it whenever I can. And reusability helps with that.
I think that kind of ties in. I think, Tammy, you were mentioning about having processes and things of that sort. Marcelo, how are you? We interviewed people from Zapier for our book, and that's one way to automate. I'm curious, how are you doing that for people that are in the audience and they're like, I would love to automate that, but I have no idea how. What's your method?
So, there in the last few years, there have been a huge boom on tools like this. You have Keyboard Maestro that allows you to all of a sudden say, look, whenever I press this set of keyboard keys on my keyboard, do this. And so you can do all kinds of things there. Open one app, copy things, find a place in another app, paste it there, find this button, click it there. You have tools like Stream that from Elgato that allows you to create this easy way into doing things. But you have all kinds of productivity apps in this space that are dedicated to automation. Apple itself has a few tools for it too that allow you to, get rid of the most repetitive tasks, things that, don't add any value. They're just, there because it's like turning in lights on and the heating and stuff like that. It's always the same. If you start noticing those things, and you'll very soon start to obsess about the amount of time that you waste on those things all added. So that's my go-to.
Awesome. Oh, I love that.
Can I add? I want to add on, if that's okay, Tammy. Because I love this because you're calling out things that most people think, oh, that doesn't take that long. It's not a big deal. But you're not thinking about, like, when you add up that time, over time, it's a huge win back, right?
Absolutely.
And what popped up in my mind when you started talking about this was, how you forget your password on websites? And now you got to go create a new password, and now you're on a whole new path, right? You've context switched. So that's something that I did as well. I realized that I kept forgetting passwords and kept having to reset passwords, and I end up automating or setting up one of those tools that will remember your passwords and create passwords for you. And it seems like a small thing, but I'm telling you, over time that stuff starts to add up. And now I'm gonna go find Keyboard Maestro and get my life together from there as well. Thank you for that.
Liv, I can resonate with that. I also was a person that kept forgetting my passwords. And then when I was at Google, I started working on some of the Google login and smart lock kind of things. And that's when I got really deeply into password managers. And it makes them safer, right, for the internet. Because if you have a password you can remember really well, usually it means it's related to your birthday. And so it's always good to have a better password there. I also really liked, Marcelo, that you mentioned the fact of if you are noticing you're really distracted anyways, if you're just kind of mindlessly going through your email or you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, that it's actually better just to step away rather than try to hunker down and kind of work through it. And that goes with a lot of research that I've seen from kind of a human psychology standpoint. 30% of the time, our minds wander. So if you are not listening to me at this moment, it's okay. I know it's based on science. And also, you can only really pay attention for 7 to 10 minutes at a time. So the idea that you could possibly focus for 8 hours of a day is just actually not biologically possible. So you might as well lean into it. And if you're like, maybe I could just spend 10 really great minutes on TikTok and have a really good laugh, and then I can go back versus trying to just kind of power through. So I think that's a great example. Anybody else? Tammy, do you have any kind of tips or hacks or tools you like to use?
I do, yeah. So I use a time budget. So, we only have so much time in a day. And during that time, I want to get all of my workouts in, all of my work in, and all of that actually takes up time. So I have, it's just a Google Sheet. It is not very sexy. It is just the amount of time that I have for the day and the time that I want to end the day. And then everything I want to get done before that. So that way I know, if it's 3 p.m. and there's only 2 hours left, I need to sacrifice something if I have a 3-hour total of tasks I want to complete. And that keeps me honest about what I can actually accomplish during a day. So I'm not constantly suffering from that inherited to-do list that you can have at the beginning of every following day, where it's I didn't accomplish anything. So my time budget is one, and then I have a couple more that are more related to mindset. So one is writing a summary of what you accomplished the previous week. So that helps me realize that I actually did get stuff done the previous week. And that's especially helpful if I'm working on some really big projects that are just not going to be fully complete in a 7-day period. So having that summary is nice because it reminds me that I actually am being productive every week. It just some weeks, things aren't completely 100% complete. And then the last thing is actually, this is a quote also from a book about writing, but you can, when it comes to large projects or things that, are going to take a long time to complete, remind yourself that you're working on that. But remind yourself also that your task today is not to accomplish that thing. So if you're writing a novel, you are writing a novel that is a very exciting, big project, but your task today is not to write the novel. Your task today is to write and work on that novel. And so that helps me as well, because I can definitely get myself into a procrastination cycle, because I'm well, I'm not going to finish that big project today, so I'm just not going to work on it at all. And that just means that you're never going to get it done ever.
Yeah, I love that of trying to write an entire book and imagine the whole process is very different than saying, I'm going to write 500 words today.
Yeah.
That is that you can like actually legitimately accomplish.
Yeah.
Another question, and so we have about 5 minutes left, and maybe we'll start with Lib this time. What's the greatest time suck that you see for organizations today? And I know you're working with a lot of them through kind of helping job seekers and the Quit Commuting Conference, but yeah, where do you think people are just really kind of going wrong with how they use their time?
Well, so I have a day job as well. So I work full time as for a software consulting company. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of jobs. And I mean, I will tell you from the company that I work for and the clients that we work with, honestly, it's meetings. I was so excited when Shopify was it Shopify announced that they were getting rid of meetings. I was like, oh my God, I need to go work there. But and mainly, and not to dig on meetings, sometimes it's very important to get together and talk through things. I, value being able to connect with and collaborate with my coworkers. But what I see quite often is that we add people to meetings just in case they need to be there. Right. And so we are wasting people's time on a regular basis. And so then we go into these meetings without true objectives. What do we need to walk out of this meeting with? Does a decision need to be made here? Do we actually need to work together on something? Is this a working session that we need to actually, work together to complete a task? Am I demoing something to someone? So my feeling, just based on the industry that I work in and the companies that I work with, it's honestly the meetings. We could get so much more done if we were more intentional about how we manage meetings.
Yes, that is, I love that. That goes back to your point on consideration and just being conscious of people's time. And ultimately, Annie Dillard has a great poem quote, and it's about how your days are essentially your life. So if you are in an hour meeting, that's an hour less of your life you will have. And especially if you're not accomplishing anything in it. Lib, I saw you just did
I just thought about it. I saw on LinkedIn today. I don't know if you guys saw this. Someone posted on LinkedIn today. There was this picture of like this Google meeting, and in it had the cost of the meeting, and it had like everybody's time. Okay, it wasn't real. It was clearly photoshopped, but it was such a cool idea. Such a cool idea, because some of these meetings, it's like, guys, this meeting is way more expensive than the value that we're going to get out of it. So what are we going to get out of it? To either reach that value or holler at me via email, please.
I want to see that image, and just a little plug for our book. We do have a meeting calculator in there, but they are really expensive. And I remember at a previous job, maybe 10 years ago, I started calculating the cost of meetings. And that was something I wanted to talk to people about. People were not necessarily interested in my thoughts at that moment. But I was like, this is a really expensive way that we're spending our time, because I know we have 20 people in this meeting. Certain people are at director level. I can probably estimate how much money is going into this meeting, and nothing's getting solved. And so it's just not a great use of time and resources. Okay, and so we're going to do kind of one more thing of questions, and then we will take a break. But I am curious, and I would love for everybody to answer this, and maybe we can start with Tammy. What's the number one thing a company can do today to improve its productivity? And if you've already mentioned something, you can add something else in.
Well, I'm just going to repeat more, I think. And just improve documentation. I mean, that's my what I would want to say about what wastes time in companies is people trying to find information, and people interrupting people to find information, and just people not having the right information, having too much information, and they can't find the information there's just a lot of time wasted. And so a better documentation practice would alleviate a lot of the time wasted trying to find information.
And what can you describe, Tammy, what is documentation? Because it's like it's not the sexiest word or the sexiest it's so critical. What is good documentation look like?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's what it sounds like, which is, writing down or codifying information that's necessary for the work to get done. And in any organization, it's going to look a little bit different. But when I talk about documentation, it's having a centralized location and process for writing down the information that people need in order to get their work done. So whether that's a single source of truth or whether it's, a compilation of SOPs, but it is a very consistent practice of having one place to go where people can find the information that they need without relying on other people.
Awesome. Thanks. Marcelo, what is your number one thing? And Allie's coming in, which I know means that I am slightly over time, but we have another minute. So please, let's finish this round of questions and then we'll go to break.
I'm going to say ownership of outcomes. It also, let me preface this by saying that every company, different stage requires different things. And it matters differently based on the status and what the company is going through. But I think ownership of outcomes is always, paramount, because you have, it's not just about adding, as a DRI, a direct responsible individual to something or initiative or whatever, but mostly that that person will optimize for not just owning something, but owning what is going to come out of it. And that has a tremendous change on, the value that you take out of anything.
Awesome. I love that. And Lib, do you want to bring us home? What's your tip?
I was actually typing it because I thought I was going to run out of time, but I would just add that I love the autonomy that both remote and Workplaceless have. And I think part of the challenge for a lot of companies getting that autonomy is they don't trust people, right? They are so afraid that productivity will go down. And what I'd like to ask companies to do is lean into allowing that to be the thing that tells you who are your good employees and who are not, right? It tells you who's not productive, and it lets you get rid of those people and bring more people in who can be people who can, own outcomes and be productive without you sitting there having to be in their face on Zoom all day.
I love that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be by proximity. It doesn't have to be by FaceTime. It can be actually based on the work that you're accomplishing. I think that is a great way to end this panel. Thank you for joining us. This was such a fun conversation. I love your tips. You are spot on. And remember, documentation, ownership, autonomy, those are some ways to go to be more productive and get things done. And now over to Allie.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Lib, Tammy, Marcelo. It was such a wonderful conversation. And, all of these topics that we're talking about today, these are the things that are not only going to power a company to reach their most successful outcomes, but it are the things that are going to allow people to live their best life, whether it's becoming digital nomads, whether it's meaning that they're going to be able to take care of childcare or elderly care, or navigating around physical or mental health challenges in their life. What I love about the remote work movement is that it truly is a movement for the betterment of people, teams, and organizations.